Grid Live Wrap-Up. NASCAR Cup Series Playoffs at Las Vegas. Big monument moment for Joey Logano. Can this continue his streak? Formula One, Charles Leclerc dominant, but Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, more controversy in their championship battle, plus MotoGP and World Rally Championship recap with the Grid ranking. I'm Joe Santiago. With me, we have Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Link in the video description to our Patreon page, where you can do a monthly investment. You could do a super chat, one-time investment as we're live on the air or even off the air. And of course, buy me a coffee as well. Let's get started with the NASCAR Cup Series at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And the big thing for Joey Logano, the championship streak continues for every even year. He's in the playoffs. He's in the championship 4. And the best news of all, post-race inspection is completed. No issues. Joey Logano is going to Phoenix to go for a 3rd championship in his NASCAR Cup Series career. This is a big monumental moment for this 22 team. Because as Ben was on the air here, recapping the Charlotte Roval Race, we were talking about the streak's over. Joey Logano will not be contending for that 3rd championship. We were talking about how it was a missed opportunity. But that second chance came in the way of Alex Bowman being disqualified. And Joey Logano came in and took the advantage of the field, made the best of this, going out there, using strategy to get the win. And I have to say, the ending of this race, while I know a caution flag late in the game, everyone made pit stops, what the pit crews could do, could Christopher Bell get towards the front, what would happen, and then a late race restart. I get it. That gets a lot of people excited, but I have to be honest. This was a very exciting finish because we saw strategy overcome the fastest car. Daniel Suarez, if he could have found a couple thousandths of a tenth of a second a lap, we could be talking about a very different story. For Christopher Bell, if he had just a pit stop just a little bit faster, maybe a little bit faster lap times, if we had one more lap, different story. This is what racing is about. And I feel too often, especially in NASCAR, when you have the late cautions, drivers being desperate, we're going to overtime, we miss out on finishes like this. This was just a stellar finish where you were on the edge of your seat. Could Joey Logano get around Dan Suarez? Could Dan Suarez pull off the major upset and get a win at Las Vegas Motor Speedway? What about Christopher Bell? Can he get there in time? Well, for Christopher Bell, he could not get there in time. If we have one more lap, I'm convinced he would have gotten to Joey Logano. For Daniel Suarez, just a few laps too many, tires, saving fuel. Christopher Bell got around him. And then for Joey Logano, it just worked out perfectly. I'll also say big kudos to his teammate, Ryan Blaney, for helping him out. We saw him pushing him down the straightaway. That had to be a big help and try to save a little bit of fuel and catch up to Daniel Suarez. Overall, Joey Logano, he put in a good effort. He did not have the fastest car. Easily, Christopher Bell had the fastest car. But Paul Wolfe, using the strategy, getting the win. He is now going to go to Phoenix. And in my opinion, similar to the last time he won a championship, he won that first race in the round of 8. That team's going to be working on the Phoenix car. He has to be one of your favorites entering Phoenix for the championship. But let's talk about another driver that should be potentially in that championship 4. Christopher Bell. He dominated this race. He was up front, led over 100 laps. I'm convinced he could have won this race. He was very disappointed after the race. He said entering next weekend, this race doesn't matter. Very harsh for Christopher Bell to say, but overall, Christopher Bell did gain a lot of points, put himself in position to secure a spot, even without a win at Homestead, as long as he has a really good race, collect stage points. Christopher Bell, without a doubt, I think is entering Miami with the mission of securing his spot in the playoffs. He could do it through the point racing, But I have to say, I believe he could be one of the favorites to win at Homestead Miami Raceway. He has been showing the speed all year long. One of the better drivers in Joe Gibbs Racing. If he could get this win next weekend at Homestead, he'll be in a really good spot as well too. But if he doesn't get that win, just collect those stage points and get a decent finish. You will finish. You're gonna get in a position to be up there towards the standings and the top to potentially secure yourself in the top four, championship four. But what a drive from him today. Just fast all day long. That 20 car just looking great. Just the strategy did not work out. And even if a caution did came up and everyone made a pit stop, you're just assuming the pit crew gives him a good stop to put him either in the lead or in the top three. We know pit rows. We saw plenty of mistakes. We know the restart, it could get just as chaotic. I think Christopher Bell, while disappointed, he has to come away knowing that a second place finish, yes, it stings considering how good you worked all day long. And Logano stayed out with strategy to get the win. Feels stolen, but he has to be feeling good about his chances at a championship as he enters Homestead Miami. And then, of course, after Homestead, Martinsville, the cutoff race, and then Miami. Let's talk about Kyle Larson. Once again, issues on the first race of the round. Atlanta, he crashed. Kansas, he crashed. Today, he had issues. Work on the front nose, put him back in the field. He then had a really lousy pit stop, lost ground. He did not finish in the top 10. He did not score stage points in the second stage. He is still quite a ways comfortably above the cut line. But as Jackson had talked about, if you have a driver that's so inconsistent, and this round, this is not wildcard races where you could have an inconsistent race and just assume, well, that's the wildcard effect. We'll come back in another race. Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Kyle Larson has won here in the past. One of the favorites. He did not get the job done. He's going to enter Homestead. That's another track. People see him as a potential favorite. Well, some news for Kyle Larson. There's other drivers that could be potential favorites in that race. Tyler Reddick, I think Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, non-playoff drivers have won there before as well too. So Kyle Larson, even though he's comfortably in the points, they need to have a solid race. They cannot have another mistake, another weak run. Because let's be honest, if you have trouble early on, you crash out, you could lose a lot of points, especially if drivers lower than the cut line, the playoffs, score stage points. You can find yourself in trouble entering Martinsville. I don't anticipate Kyle Larson to have such a bad weekend at Homestead, but I was just disappointed in his performance at Las Vegas today, considering he is a past winner here. I just saw the team, that sloppy pit stop. Glad they made the adjustment to just, hey, let's make sure the tire's all good, take care of everything, work your way to the front. He just missed out on the top 10 finish, but they have to execute because that's what you got to do. And especially in Phoenix, is just one race for the championship. We know Joey Logano can execute when the pressure is there. Joey Logano could be hard to beat. Overall, Kyle Larson, he cannot have issues. And Denny Hamlin, talking about issues, pit road today must have just felt like dreadful coming down from everything from a slow pit stop, a loose wheel. That team just not on top of their game this weekend. The car was not fast. Just riding around. I don't know if this is part of Denny Hamlin being distracted with everything going on with 2311 and the lawsuit against NASCAR, or if there's just simply something amiss with that team. Because Christopher Bell's team, they're running fast. They're looking good. Martin Truex up towards the front today. He was looking pretty good too. What's going on with Denny Hamlin? This is not looking like a Denny Hamlin that will make the championship four. This looks like a Denny Hamlin that will miss out on the championship four. And right now, when you look at the playoff standings, obviously, Joey Logano's in. You got Bell, Larson, and Byron. Those will be your four drivers potentially going in. So overall, Denny Hamlin, that number 11 team is just not running on all cylinders. it'll be really interesting to see what happens at Homestead. If he can have a good run, get a win, this will all be forgotten. But if he comes out average, mid pack, not a contender, you're going to be entering Martinsville in a race where, as Denny Hamlin has to tell you, you look like you're going in, entering turn 3 and exiting turn 4, but he's been eliminated because of Ross Chastain, that Hail Melon. Anything can happen in Martinsville. It may not be the big wild card race, but you got to have a good race. You have to keep your car in one piece, keep everything together, and be aware of what your competition is doing. So overall, it is something to follow. In the chat room, Adam, Christopher Bell will be in the championship for in Phoenix. Like I said, I think after his dominant race in Las Vegas Motor Speedway, he has to have a good race in Homestead. I'm pretty confident he will, and he will secure his spot in there. Another driver, though, that has to work on securing their spot, and they said they came out here looking for a win, and they were disappointed they didn't get that win. William Byron. Right now, he is entering Homestead, Miami, 27 points above the cut line. On paper, that looks good. If this was 27 points above the cut line entering Martinsville, I would say William Byron is in a very good spot. Just collect some stage points in stage 1, 2, you can secure your spot. But this is only 27 points entering the second race in the round of 3 races. That's essentially 2 stage wins and 7 positions. He cannot enter, relax, thinking, I got this in the bag. William Byron has to be racing hard and again going for the stage points and the win at Homestead, Miami. If you could have that 27 point or better entering Martinsville, you're going to feel pretty good. But let's not forget what happened last year to William Byron in Martinsville. Just came out there. People thought he was a sure driver to go out there, get a win. He nearly missed the championship 4. He just went out there, did not perform. That was last year in Martinsville in the playoff race. This last time in Martinsville, this year earlier, a different story. But William Byron at 27 points, do not take that for granted because look at the drivers behind you. You got Tyler Reddick, you got Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney. All those drivers are going to be going for the championship as well, too. They're going to try to get a win. I think one of the big things, Denny Hamlin, another strong, fierce competitor. Any one of those drivers could win at Homestead next weekend. And then you can find yourself below the cut line because now you have 2 drivers that have won below you. So William Byron, you got a points race, but you got to win because if you're still behind Kyle Larson, if you're still behind Christopher Bell, and you get a winner from below the cut line at Homestead, Miami, you're now below the cut line as well, William Byron. So he has a lot riding on his future in Homestead, Miami. And let's talk about Tyler Reddick. In the chat room, Tyler Reddick, flip and continue on pit road. That's crazy. That crash is something I have not seen before. And I'm sort of surprised, to be honest. We haven't seen something like this more regularly. The way Tyler Reddick's car spun and hit the little racetrack in the tri-oval. Of course, Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Texas Motor Speedway, Charlotte, Atlanta. If you go to those tracks, you know, in the tri-oval, there's a little course, particularly for the legend cars, bandoleros, where they race on pit road, the front straightaway, and have those corners. As Tyler Reddick's car slid and hit the race course track transition from the grass to the track, that, next thing you know, made the car start getting airborne. It rolled, landed on his wheels. He proceeded to pit road. But I just knew as soon as he drove into pit road, I was like, well, that's great. The car's running. But there's no way you can't keep running. You most likely got way too much damage to fix under the damaged vehicle policy. And that was the case. Tyler Reddick was done for. What I'm really curious about, will the folks at SMI that owns Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Atlanta, Texas, Charlotte, will they look at, okay, maybe we need to do something about this? Granted, the only other example I can think of something similar was when Chris Buescher in Charlotte Motor Speedway had a rollover similar like this. in the Coca-Cola 600, but that's the only two I could think of. Is this something where it could occur more frequently? We don't know. We know the racing is more aggressive than it has been before. There's a likelihood it could happen, but overall, I think it might be warrant SMI to see, could we make that transition a little less of a jump for if a car goes over. We know some tracks, AstroTurf is the solution. Maybe that could be it. It is just one of those deals where what a wild moment for Tyler Reddick. After winning stage one, looking like, okay, this could be a good day, and having that day now below the cut line, he has to feel pretty good entering Homestead. Just, again, come out with a fast car, lead the laps, collect points, contend for the win. You're in a good spot. Tyler Reddick knows how to win a Homestead. I think you cannot count him out. But what a crazy ride for Tyler Reddick. And involved in that crash, Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott is now 59 points below the cut line. We're talking nearly a must-win situation for him. Even if he scores stage wins in Homestead Miami, you're now down to minus 39 points. You're going to have to beat everybody to try to gain serious points on them entering Martinsville. Elliott knows how to win in Martinsville, but so does all the other drivers. And they're not afraid to give the bumper to prevent you from winning if they need a win to advance to that championship four. So Chase Elliott, that crash with him, Tyler Reddick, Brad Keselowski, that was just disastrous. He has to go out there, find himself a fast car for Homestead Miami. In my opinion, go for the win. That is the only thing they could do. If they're going to try to sell for second place and some stage points, it may not be enough. That's not going to guarantee you a spot in the championship four. At 59 points, you need the other drivers to have bad luck if you're not going to win. You cannot just rely on consistency at this point. There's 2 races to go. Homestead, Martinsville. Try to win either one. Put yourself in this championship four for Chase Elliott. I think he has a big, tall order ahead of him. And let's give it to his other teammate, Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman, another top 5 finish. If he was still in the playoffs, imagine what he could have done to be there in the top 5. Super unfortunate that that team got disqualified at Charlotte, allowing Joey Logano a second opportunity of continuing that streak. I was curious, would he respond with another strong finish, showing, hey, we still got the pace, we can still go out there and get the wins? Or will that team just sort of quietly fall towards the back, mid-pack, and not do anything? Very impressive for him to get a top 5 finish. I think Alex Bowman showing that he belongs in Hendrick Motorsports. Be really interested to see what he could do in Homestead, Miami. Martinsville, he knows how to win there. Don't count out Alex Bowman for a surprise win. And here is a surprising fact. This was brought up yesterday by Issa and Jackson. So far in this playoffs, only 2 playoff drivers have won in the playoffs. Joey Logano, 2 wins. Kyle Larson, 2 wins. The other drivers have been non-playoff drivers. And we're now entering the final 3 races of the playoffs with Homestead, Martinsville, and Phoenix. We know at Phoenix, Ross Chastain last year won that race and he was not in the playoffs. We know Homestead, there's quite a few drivers that know how to win there. And of course, Martinsville, really wide open race. If you have a good solid car, you could go out there, get a win. It has been very interesting to see that only 2 playoff drivers have won so far in the playoffs. I think it says something about those 2 teams. Kyle Larson, if he's fast and perfect, you cannot beat him. We've seen him dominate races. Just go out there in a league of his own. Jackson said yesterday, he has to be the favorite, without a doubt. The inconsistency, that could be a concern. The way he's looking, if he has a decent day at Homestead, he could enter pretty solidly confident into Martinsville. And if he dominates Martinsville, a track Hendrick Motorsports love to go to, he could then just secure another win, add another one to his tally for this year. So overall, that is very unique to see that only those two drivers, him, Logano, have gotten wins during the playoffs. Bunch of non-playoff drivers. Alex Bowman, one of those non-playoff drivers now that could potentially steal a win at Martinsville, and don't count him out at Homestead. One story we are following though in NASCAR, and that is Ryan Blaney. Of course, as you know, Ryan Blaney had a big crash in practice. Spun, hit the wall, seemed to be okay enough to get out of the car, but then there were some concerns. He was evaluated at the infield track center, released, talked to the media, participated in today's race. However, in today's race, again, another hard hit, got involved in the crash, managed to finish the race still. But one of the things we're hearing that was during the race, he was reportedly asking for Advil, some sort of medication to help him as his head was hurting. Kelly Crandall has tweeted that there could be concussion concerns for Ryan Blaney. We know the seriousness of concussions in motorsports. We are now in an age where we're not in the early 2000s or the 1990s, where a driver just says, oh, just take some goodies, Tylenol, Advil, focus harder, go out there and race. We don't want what happened to Dale Earnhardt Jr. to happen to another driver where they have undiagnosed concussion, a concussion, a concussion. They didn't have an easier, lower tolerance for a hit, causing a concussion and worse. NASCAR does not want to see their star drivers sidelined for long periods of time because of concussion. They want to see a driver say, hey, I got a concussion. I'm going to have to sit out. Noah Gragson this year had to do that. We've seen plenty of drivers. Bowman, another driver that had injury, sat out. Once they were 100%, they came back. So this is a bit of a concern I have. Of course, nothing has been confirmed about any concussion for Ryan Blaney. Let me repeat that. Nothing has been confirmed, but just from what was heard in the radio, the concerns of the two hard hits. What does Ryan Blaney and that Team Penske team do? Does NASCAR intervene saying, hey, we want you to get cleared before you enter Homestead, Miami? I'm convinced if he does get cleared for Miami to race, that he is in a sound state where he can go out there, race, and not injure himself more if there was any concern of concussions. But the big thing I think a lot of folks are starting to wonder, you have a championship where if you miss one race, you could lose that championship because you will just put yourself in a must-win situation in Martinsville, a racetrack Ryan Blaney has won at before. But you don't want to risk that possibility of entering Martinsville in a must-win situation. I think this is very important steps for NASCAR, Penske, and Ryan Blaney to consider to take care of your health, to see what's the best course. Because, yes, I get it, especially for the Ryan Blaney fans out there. You want to see Blaney in the championship with the opportunity to defend the championship, make it 2 in a row. But I also think we could all agree, too. We want the drivers out there because they're 100% good health, not trying to battle concussion, because we don't want a potential scenario of a driver with an undiagnosed concussion getting themselves in a situation and they cause more harm to themselves. So overall, this is something we're going to be following. Any news and updates, of course, will be reported on Grid Tonight. If it's sooner, Grid Encore might mention it, but for sure, Grid Tonight right here on the Grid Network. Subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs on the Grid Network. And that is our recap for the South Point 400. Once again, Joey Logano, your winner. Christopher Bell dominated the race, and Tyler Reddick had a big crash where he rolled over on the straightaway. Same time that was all going on, I was over in Joshua Birch Motorsports calling the Formula One race. Of course, Joshua Birch recovering. It will soon, Josh. We're looking forward to seeing you on Grid Tonight again. That Formula One race, Kobe, that was something else. And the performance by Charles Leclerc, That is something of championship caliber.
Yeah, definitely championship caliber. But unfortunately for Ferrari, it's a little too late, to be thinking about the championship. But if you're a fan of Ferrari, especially down the stretch this year, heading into 2025, you have to be very excited what you saw today from both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. And at the end of the day, it was Charles Leclerc who ended up dominating the United States Grand Prix, leading to a Ferrari 1-2 finish. Behind the two Ferraris of Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, there was a controversy over the third place finisher, Max Verstappen, who was battling Lando Norris for the final spot on the podium. Norris had fresher tires and moved outside at the end of the long backstretch, and Verstappen went wide. Both cars went off track, but Lando made the pass. But Lando was the one who was handed that 5-second time penalty. So, Joe, did the FIA stewards make the right call to penalize Lando Norris? I know a lot of people were really fired up about this.
I was fired up too about this call. We saw the race in action where the move Lando Norris made, I hate to say it was a trap by Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen knows what he's doing out there. From before the move, you'll watch the replays. You can see how, as they exited turn one on top of the hill, that was the closest Lando Norris was getting to Max Verstappen, nearly side by side. But once they entered the S's, where you were a single groove, the dirty, turbulent air was switching back and forth through those S's. That wore out Lando Norris's car through dirty air and worn out tires. So every time we got to that backstretch, Lando was not as close as he could be compared to if he had a little bit of cleaner air, better momentum entering that. So it always put Lando Norris at a really hard spot at the end of that straightaway. He made the move to the outside, and this is where Max Verstappen, he knows what he's doing. Because whereas Ayrton Senna would put a driver in a situation where you're either going to crash into me or you're going to back out. In the case of Max Verstappen, you're either going to crash into me or you're looking at a track limit penalty. And that's what happened here. If you look at that slow-mo replay, it looks like for a split second, Lando Norris might be entering the apex ahead of Max Verstappen. But as they start to turn in, that's where it looks like Max Verstappen might be even or just a tad bit ahead. And then he makes that wide corner. We saw what the FIA did with George Russell, giving him that penalty, which we felt was a little bit off. He served that 5-second penalty. To see Lando Norris get this 5-second penalty, it's one of those deals where I feel the FIA, just by reading the letter of the law, said, okay, he was pushed, he made the pass outside the track limits, never gave it up. That's a penalty. But when you look at how Max Verstappen races, this is where I think everyone gets upset, because what was Lando Norris's real option? Cause a crash? Well, guess what? Max Verstappen's fine with that. If you both crash out and you both score no points, Max Verstappen maintains the same lead on you with a few races to go. You could have given the position back and try again, but I just feel Max Verstappen is just not going to fall for it a second time. You know this was your one opportunity. I think McLaren was just in a poor spot, Kobe, to be honest. You knew the rule. You know how Max Verstappen's going to race you. So this was put on the FIA. The letter of the law says it's a penalty. That's what they went with. But if there was a way they could see, okay, take these circumstances, particularly how Max Verstappen went wide, I don't know if that really should have been called as a penalty, considering how this went down with Max Verstappen going wide. Because the only other option really was Lando crashing into Max Verstappen, and then they're both out, which, again, favors Max Verstappen.
Yeah, today was definitely a favorable day for Max Verstappen. It's unfortunate, that we have a controversy to talk about after this race. But what doesn't surprise me is, that it involves Max Verstappen, because he usually seems to find himself in these positions. But I think a lot of people were really upset by the fact that the car that got pushed wide is the one who ended up getting the penalty. but I saw a point Karun Chandit made on social media. He said should McLaren have told Lando Norris to give the spot back to Max, and then he could have potentially repassed him later on. Maybe maybe that's a good point from Karun. If Lando had decided to give Max that place back and then try to get him at another section of the track, then maybe just maybe he could have avoided the 5-second time penalty. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that happened, but all in all, Verstappen and Norris put on a really exciting battle during the final laps of the race. That was definitely the most exciting battle on the racetrack. The two drivers going for the championship after Max Verstappen, had a great weekend at the United States Grand Prix over Lando Norris. Sure, I'm sure Lando is feeling a bit disappointed in that entire McLaren team because, as we've seen, McLaren's really chipped away at Red Bull's advantage, and now the races are running out. Lando's running out of time to try to take the fight to Max in the drivers' championship, and after today, he might just run out of time to get there. And like we've been saying for the last several race weekends, we still believe at the end of the day Max Verstappen was going to end up winning the championship, but Lando Norris, he was always going to make it interesting here down the stretch. And I feel like this weekend was definitely a missed opportunity by McLaren to make it even more interesting as we go to Mexico City next race weekend and the other races to close out the rest of the year. So Joe, I want to ask you a follow-up on this. Do you think the FIA needs to revisit the rule on track limits on a car being pushed wide?
I do think they need to revisit it because, especially, they have all the telemetry data as well from steering input, the onboard cameras, which, as some people pointed out, we never saw the onboard camera from Max Verstappen's onboard of that incident. Because this is just something I feel leaves a lot of fans frustrated. A lead driver could essentially just enter side by side, force their opponent on the outside, and just push them wide. And even if they get around him, they get the spot back. There has to be something to be done about this. And this is, again, I think, one of those deals where what do you do as the FIA? Do you introduce a new rule that says if you're pushed wide? Because now we're going to have to make that judgment call. Was the driver pushed wide, or was he given enough room? I just think this is just one of those deals the FIA, they need to revisit. But as for a clear solution that doesn't involve a judgment call, that is really going to be hard to make. I mean, the simplest thing could have just simply be, hey, no track limits. We know this track has another series that comes out here with no track limits at all. Maybe F1 should impose certain track limits, and then some areas where there are no track limits. And this area, if just had no track limits, I feel like it's not an advantage, really. That could be something in consideration, but I do think there's a lot of fans that would like to see the FIA revisit this during the off season.
Well, I think the FIA need to revisit more than just this rule. I honestly think the FIA has way too many rules to begin with. They have like a rule for absolutely everything. I just feel like that's completely unnecessary, and that's why we end up in situations like this talking about controversies like we are right now involving Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. So yeah, I do agree with you, Joe. I think they do need to revisit this rule among many other rules that they have. Yeah, and I don't know if F1 is ever going to get to the point where they're like, we're going to impose track limits here, but we're not going to impose in other parts. So, Formula One has always been true sticklers about track limits and, not, and with the cars stand on the racetrack and all of that. So if you go off even just a little bit, that's going to be a problem, as we saw with Lando Norris today. It just seems kind of odd that they penalized the car, the one who ended up getting pushed wide. But I guess Karun Chandit made a good point. Yeah, maybe you avoid a penalty if you give the place back to Max Verstappen, but who knows? We won't ever know that. We just have to brush off this little controversy and move on to the next race weekend, which is next Sunday. And we had one safety car in this race. It was for Lewis Hamilton, the first since the Canadian Grand Prix. Hamilton spun off into the gravel trap and got stuck. The rest of the race was caution-free, and overall, it was a fair race. Well, maybe not fair if you consider the Verstappen and Norris incident. I guess it depends on what your definition of fair is. But all in all, Ferrari was dominant in front of a full crowd at COTA. Do you believe Formula One is doing a good job of keeping the American audience's interest level sustainable? We have Las Vegas in a month's time, and we already had Miami in the spring.
Yeah, I would have to say I do believe Formula One is doing a good job in keeping the fan interest up in Formula One. One of the big things I think when we learned of Las Vegas, Miami coming into the schedule was what's going to happen with the Circus of Americas. Will they see a decline in attendance? Will they be able to be competitive with the other two races? And so far, I gotta say, seeing the crowd for the sprint race, the crowd today, the crowd all weekend long, you got to give it to Formula One for maintaining the attention span of the American audience to attend one of three races. Some of them might be attending all three races. You got to have some big pockets with deep wallets to do that. Overall, when it comes to this race, I think the Circus of America is one of the better tracks when you look at Miami, Las Vegas. The racing action there, it is really good. You could enter side by side after the long straightaway. If you're on the outside, you'll be on the inside the next corner. If you're still on the inside, you're going to be back on the outside. We saw some great racing overall. I think this is a track that belongs long term, longer than the current deals that they have with some of the street courses like Miami, Las Vegas, because we know a street course to have such a long tenure is really challenging. So many moving parts. Formula One does not have that here. They have a racetrack located near Austin, Texas, a destination city. This is just, in my opinion, Kobe, it just makes sense. Keep Circus of the Americas. Miami, let's see how long that lasts. That could be a racetrack that might be replaced by another destination track. Las Vegas, I still think F1 wants to make that the new Monaco of the future. Let's see how long that lasts, but keep Circus of the Americas. I think it produces better racing overall. Is it a barn burner like Baku, where we call it Talladega F1? No, but we saw some good racing overall. And the fact that this challenges the driver to the point where Lewis Hamilton lost control. He said he felt like he hit bumps and crashed out. One of the best of all time. This is a really good track, and I think to see what they're doing, F1, keeping the American audience interest up there and a good turnout here, that's a big win for them.
And more on that Lewis Hamilton situation, I read some of the comments he made after the race, and he said he believed that his accident happened because of the new upgrades that Mercedes brought to the car. So I guess there's that for Lewis. I know it was really disappointing for him because we know out of all the drivers on the grid, it seems like nobody loves America like Lewis Hamilton does. He loves being here. He considers this like his home away from home, and he wants to do well in these races, especially, this is final race at COTA and a Mercedes, so I'm sure he wanted to do well. So it was just an unfortunate ending for him today. And I agree with you, Joe, about COTA. I think it's definitely become a staple on the F1 calendar. Yeah, heck, they even built this track specifically for Formula One. If they weren't interested in coming back to the United States, COTA would have never been built. I remember seeing I remember when they actually dug up the place, where you saw the outline of COTA on a dirt road, saw a Red Bull car going around the track before they actually filled it in with asphalt. Yeah, so we saw when COTA first came about, and see what this event has become over the years, and then especially the last several years, we've seen these massive crowds, hundreds of thousands of people attending the event. It's just really remarkable to see how F1 has blossomed in the United States. And I think Circuit of America is definitely one track that needs to stick around on a schedule for many years to come. And the United States Grand Prix needs to stay at Circuit of America. I think that's the one race that is absolutely safe. And like you were saying about Miami, it's been there've been a lot of yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe the Miami track. And I know the Miami market is very important, and I get all of that, but I think a lot of people can agree that the Miami Grand Prix layout is, not really the best track that we have. So maybe that could be a race that's not necessarily safe. Maybe you try another market, another city. I know Chicago's been rumored in the past, and people have always wanted to, see Formula One race on the streets of New York City if that's possible. That would also be wonderful, and I'm sure there are some other American cities as well that will really be excited to host a Formula One race in Las Vegas. I'm happy that race is going to get a do-over, because if you look at the Las Vegas market, and especially last year, seeing the cars under the light, it's so wonderful looking at those F1 cars, just fly down the Las Vegas Strip. Definitely a very scenic circuit on the Formula One calendar, and we did see some decent action last year as well. So like you were saying about making this the new Monaco, I really want the Las Vegas weekend to be a success. I know we had a lot of problems last year getting this event started, but usually not all the time, but sometimes when you have new events like this, year one, usually a lot of growing pains. I'm sure Formula One learned from that. So when we go to Las Vegas in a month from now, we certainly hope to see, an event that runs smoothly from beginning to end. I still think the Las Vegas event has a lot more potential. I know last year after it happened, we were, like all doom and gloom about Las Vegas and like maybe we should have never come to Las Vegas. But now, having a lot of time to think about it, I think Las Vegas definitely deserves another chance. And I hope this event can become successful because it's just so beautiful, watching the race there at night. And we'll see what happens with that third Formula One date, if Miami is going to stick around for a long time or if it's going to change, or even if Formula One may expand and go 4 races in the United States. I don't think a lot of people, in the F1 world would want to see that. They'd like to see them more spread out around the world, but we'll just have to see what Liberty Media is going to do. And I believe we have some comments in the chat room, Joe, if you want to display those. Ed Hunter, nice to see you, Ed. Been a while. You say, for me, it's actually the design of turn 12 that was the problem. Far too much runoff. He said put on a wall of gravel, and that solves the problem. Yep, that traditional track limits, right? And then he also said we saw it happen so many times with other drivers as well, and I don't think it's purely an issue with Max's defending, which was on the limit. And Ed says you believe that Lewis is mentally checked out from Mercedes and just waiting to move to Ferrari. He just seems resigned and frustrated on the radio. Yeah, that's a good point you bring up on Lewis. We're at the point of the season now where the team, is probably, giving George Russell all the focus. They're really excited about Kimi Antonelli. Even so, Kimi get a warm welcome at the Mercedes factory. And usually when a driver's moving on from a team, they usually shut you off from like certain data. You don't get to attend all the meetings you get to attend. And now we've really gotten to the lame duck phase of the Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes relationship. Yeah, it's unfortunate, that it's this way, but business is business, and people don't always stay everywhere else forever. And especially after seeing how well Ferrari run this weekend, if I'm Lewis Hamilton, I'm thinking, can the 2025 season come tomorrow? Because if you give him a car, Lewis Hamilton be right up there competing for wins and podiums on a regular basis. Once again, yeah, Lewis definitely does seem very frustrated with how things are going. And looking ahead to next race weekend, as I said, Formula One is heading to Mexico City at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. And that's a track that's been really good for Red Bull. But McLaren could have the advantage with the long straights at Mexico City, and Ferrari was very impressive today at COTA, which has some technical sections. Joe, which team and driver is your early favorite for the pole in Mexico City?
Mexico City, considering the altitude, so it's going to be lighter air, it's a little less drag. I'm looking at the McLarens, the Ferraris, and maybe George Russell in that Mercedes as potential favorites for the pole. Max Verstappen could wheel that Red Bull around, so he could potentially get the job done still. But overall, I think it's very wide open between those teams, just because Mexico City, you have that very long front straightaway. The Mercedes, no, excuse me, not Mercedes. Well, the Mercedes power plant, but that McLaren especially could be really fast. But you can't count out Ferrari as well too, because Ferrari, we saw in Monza, very fast with those long straightaways. You look at Red Bull, they've been good here in the past. I think they could still be just as good too. Particularly Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, you have to do really good at this race. If you cannot perform at the Mexico City Grand Prix, you have another disastrous race where you crashed out before you complete a lap. I think you're going to be replaced by Red Bull. He has to come here in front of the home crowd, have a strong race. And then you look at the Ferrari drivers, Charles Leclerc. I think he's potentially a good winner. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, they could get the pole as well too. George Russell. I think those are the drivers I'm looking at for the favorites for it. So wide open with this track at Mexico City.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously heading into this race weekend, given the history of Red Bull there, I think you probably have to look at Red Bull as being one of the favorites. And I know we've seen Lando Norris, McLaren, Oscar Piastri come on big over the last few months. and then Ferrari show up with an excellent performance today, I think it's honestly wide open, as you've been alluding to, Joe. But the one driver I'm sure who really wants this race to go well more than any other is probably Sergio Perez, because I think all of us know it's probably one of the, I guess, one of the most obvious things that probably not going to see him in a Red Bull car in 2025. I know his contract goes through next year, but as we all know, contracts are basically meaningless in motorsport because you can always go through the legal process and get out of those contracts. So I really don't think Sergio is going to be driving for Red Bull next year. And if he is, I'll be extremely surprised. So Mexican Grand Prix, he's going to be so excited to come home, want to do well in front of his home crowd. I think he'll have some extra motivation to go out there, win the pole, and if a race win is in the cars, we'll just have to wait and see about that. And Ed Hunter said that George Russell started in the pit lane and got a 5-second time penalty today, and he still beat Perez. And that's a great point you brought up, Ed. It just shows you that's another example of the struggles we've seen with Sergio Perez, who continues to not meet the standards of what it means to be a Red Bull racing driver and the type of car that he's in. And that's another reason why I believe that he's not going to be with that team next year. So I think this very well could be his last Formula One race at home. So I'm sure he'll want to go out there and show up and show out for his hometown fans. But we don't know what the future really holds for him, so we'll have to see what Red Bull decides. But I have a feeling that Red Bull is probably going to make the decision to move on from him and probably promote Liam Lawson. I thought Liam Lawson had a really solid race weekend at COTA, and if he continues this throughout the rest of the season, then maybe he gets that second seed alongside Verstappen in 2025, because it seems like the team has no desire to promote Yuki Tsunoda at all. I don't know what it is between Tsunoda and Red Bull, but they just seem very comfortable to have him in that Visa Cash App RB car. They don't really seem motivated to give him a spot with the Red Bull senior team. And Ed made another comment saying, he said at this point Red Bull should just clone Max Verstappen at this point because nobody else seems to be able to drive that car. And Joe, before we move on to the grid ranking, MotoGP and World Rally Championship, like, what on earth was going on this weekend between Liam Lawson and Fernando Alonso? It seemed like they had like a little spat going on the racetrack. It was like a war, like something happened on the track. I believe it might have been in the sprint race or a practice session. You'll have to have to fill me in on that, Joe. I just know there was an incident on track, and then I saw a words between the Lawson and Alonso. It was just really bizarre to see.
Yeah, those two are not going to be sending each other Christmas presents anytime soon. The feud really started, I believe it was in the qualifying, where Lawson believes that he put it this way. Liam Lawson said, Fernando Lawson said he would screw him over essentially after what happened on the track. And essentially the heat battle between them really just seemed to kept escalating. Lawson called Lawson an idiot. I remember that. And this was all going on Saturday, and it was just one of those deals where it was like, what's going on? What is going on between these two? Because Fernando Alonso, multi-time champion, I get a sense there might be some frustration of after last year with Aston Martin, wow, look how great you're doing, and then this year, nothing. For Fernando Alonso to say he was screwed with Liam Lawson and essentially kept his word, that's just something where Lawson's not happy with. Lawson, I think he's gonna. It's funny because last year it seemed like he got almost like a big reception, like, wow, you're doing so great, you're gonna be off to a great start. And then I feel like this is a Fernando Alonso saying, welcome to F1, you're in my territory, you're gonna have to deal with me, and I'm not gonna make it easy for you. But yeah, Alonso heated after the sprint, qualifying, the two of them getting each other. Then, of course, Lawson starting to back with I believe it was a 40 or a 60-point grid penalty, which is like ridiculous. I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, see, another one of those silly FA rules that need to go away. It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense. It was something else. And I see it looks like Ed has got some additional info. Since they're starting the first two laps of the sprint where they didn't leave each other enough space, I remember that. Passing him in qualifying, that's where I was thinking it really was starting up. I agree with Joe. Alonso just seems either bitter about his own situation, Lawson is a handy scapegoat. Yeah, like you said, this is a feud I did not anticipate at the beginning of the year. And Lawson still went out there, scored points. Overall, had a really good day. And as Edward said, especially unfortunate for Lawson, since Ricciardo was the one who got the grid penalty. So, but anyways, yeah, that's going to be the story we're going to be following, I think, for Mexico and so on. Because one of the things we got to remember, Kobe, Mexico, that was the last time we saw a great Daniel Ricciardo in that AlphaTauri den, now VCAR or Taros or whatever the name was last year. What can Lawson do at this track, and will he be around Alonso again?
Yeah, F1 rivals, right? This was definitely a feud that I did not see coming at all. And I have to agree with what Ed said. Alonso, seemed to just be frustrated, and Liam Lawson just happened to be there. So he was getting the brunt of Alonso's anger, which I still don't really understand why he's so upset with the driver who's just trying to make it in Formula One. And then Alonso's like, this guy's career is in his own hands, not mine, and all that. I'm like, why are you been so aggressive, Fernando? Like, what did Liam Lawson do to you? So yeah, we'll see if anything comes of this in the future, but I'm sure there'll be no love lost between them when they're racing each other on track moving forward in the future. And speaking of moving forward, we're going to move on to a grid ranking involving MotoGP and World Rally Championship. In the grid ranking, so Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin retained the top two spots. Marc Marquez took the win at Phillip Island despite an issue with his tear-off at the start of the race. A tear-off from his helmet, hot underneath the rear tire in the grid, resulted in a poor start. He really could have wiped out there, but luckily he didn't. However, we witnessed a flashback of the Marc Marquez of old from his days as a Honda rider before 2020 with a big ride to the front to win the race. And after that, interesting start, we didn't think Marc Marquez was going to be able to do something like this, but he ended up standing on the top step of the podium at Phillip Island. But looking at the championship picture, Jorge Martin now leads Pecco Bagnaia by 20 points. With 3 more rounds in the MotoGP season remaining, Marquez said the championship is over for him, but if you look at the math and all of that, he's still mathematically eligible, but Marquez says his championship hopes are realistically over. Do you think that's the best approach for him to just go for wins?
I do, because I feel it takes away the pressure of the championship. You're not in the discussion of the championship like Jorge Martin, Pecco Bagnaia, because we know he has to essentially like win every race, have those two, have bad luck to get a shot at it. But look what that did. Marc Marquez just went out there, got the win. He is racing for wins, not thinking about the championship picture. And I think that really was a great strength at Phillips Island. Like you said, I could not believe that start. I thought, what's going on? Why? How did you smoke the tires? And then just to see that replay where he rips the tear off, throws it down, can't find it, then it's under the back tire, and that causes that poor start. He's lucky another rider didn't just collided into him. And then that masterful drive. I'm convinced, Kobe, if he was talking about championship picture, being perfect, trying to do everything right, even though this is Marc Marquez, he has multiple championships, I think he would have not been able to get towards the front, potentially crash out, because we remember for a while it seemed like Marc Marquez would just get towards the front, crash. That was not the case. I think Marc Marquez has a good, solid reasoning. Just go out there, get the wins. Don't worry about this championship. Don't think about the pressure. You got to ride with the Ducati factory team next year. Your future is looking really good. Whatever you could get with Grazzini right now, wins, podiums, that team is going to be more than happy to get that done. They'll give you the opportunity. So I think this is just a great mindset for Marc Marquez to go out there, get the wins. And that's why I think really helps him prevail at Phillips Island.
Yeah, and I will say it's really great for the sport. It's great for MotoGP to see a Marc Marquez in this form because this is the multi-time MotoGP world champion that that we've seen for years, but in the last several years, it seemed like that guy has disappeared. And I'll be honest, Joe, I didn't think that version of Marc Marquez was ever going to return. I thought it was just going to, be a good performance here and then a whole bunch, bad performances, like we've seen in recent years, as he's been battling injuries. But you mentioned mindset. It really seems like Marc Marquez's mindset is finally back to where it was during the earlier days in his career, when he was absolutely smoking the competition and dominating MotoGP, when this was basically his championship and everybody else was just trying to keep up with him. Yeah, Marc Marquez, realistically speaking, probably not going to be in the championship fight, at the very end of the season. Like we say, he's mathematically still eligible, but realistically, it's probably just down to a two-man race between Bagnaia and Martin. But heading into 2025 with that Ducati factory team, Marc Marquez definitely has to be one of your early favorites for next year's MotoGP World Championship. And I think the best thing he can do, is just go out there and focus on getting those race wins. And if for some crazy reason something goes wrong between Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia, and Marc Marquez is able to, collect max points and go on a late season run, never say never. Who knows what can happen? But all in all, I think that the best thing he can do is just do what he's doing now. Pressure's off. Don't even think about the championship, even if you're still mathematically eligible with a very low percentage chance of actually winning this thing. The best thing he can do is just do what he's doing, like he did in Phillip Island. Have some great rides, win races, and just keep building that confidence. Keep building that confidence that Marc Marquez can continue to build his confidence and get back to the level that he was in the past on a more consistent basis, and that's going to be scary for the rest of the MotoGP competition heading into 2025. And we also had another race going on this weekend. It was the World Rally Championship. They had one race remaining. That's next month with Rally Japan, and the championship battle is down to two drivers. Thierry Neuville now has a 25-point lead over his teammate Tonic. Neuville is looking for his very first championship, and Tonic's hoping to win his second. Cannot Tonic claim the lead in the championship at Rally Japan?
This is going to be very interesting with the way the points set up, with points from the first couple of days and then Sunday a second set of points. It could happen. It really could. Tonic needs to have a good race, and I feel Tonic has to feel more confident entering the Japan Rally Race weekend, because we've talked about this quite a lot throughout the year. When it comes to Thierry Neuville, it seems almost every year we talk about, oh, he's a potential championship contender. Starts off slow, doesn't make any really good progress. Later in the year, he'll get that win. He shows that potential, but then just doesn't have a race that shows good promise. This race weekend, finished fourth place. Okay, that's fine and dandy, especially normally you got to look at, okay, you just missed out on the podium. But Tonic has come alive late in the season. From the early struggles of the season to just finishing the races, getting the wins, and to get this win, now put himself within reach. He could easily just go out there, focus on his race weekend, just clean stage after good stage after good stage. And I feel he could put the pressure on Neuville. I get a sense that Neuville, I feel he's under more pressure to go out there and claim his first championship, to show that he is capable of getting the job done after so many years. With the rumors of what's going to happen with Hyundai, I think he really starting to feel like, okay, I got to deliver. I got to do all this stuff. That pressure could build up. Can he step it up to the pressure, deliver a good race weekend? Or could he fall behind, falter, and lose? At the end of the day, this is just to the point where you cannot just ride around, have a good day. You got to be ahead of Autonic. I think this is setting up for a really interesting Rally Japan between the two teammates.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. There's gonna be a lot of pressure on both of these rally racers to go out there and execute and limit your mistakes. And the thing is about rally racing, there's so many different places, where this can go wrong. As we've seen in the past, you hit a rock, or something else crazy happens and you end up flipping over and crashing out of the race. So I think the thing that both of these drivers can do heading into Rally Japan, and just focus on execution, hitting your marks, and try not to take too many risks. And we know rally racing is risky in general, so I honestly think it could be anybody's game heading into the season finale. But like you say, Thierry Neuville trying to win his first championship, that could be a lot of pressure. And we've seen a lot of drivers, go into these championship races, trying to win their first championship, and it doesn't always go well for them. And then the guy who has a championship winning experience ends up going out taking the championship. Sometimes drivers need to learn how to lose a championship before, they need to lose a championship before they learn how to win one. And we'll see if that's going to be the case for Thierry Neuville, but I'm sure he's going to be putting his best foot forward so he can try to hold on, so he can finally say that he is a world rally champion. And we're counting down the weekends left for the rest of the grid ranking. There are 6 more race weekends, and then we can go into hibernation. Not really, because Formula E starts up their 2025 season in December, so we're not going to have a long off season this year, unfortunately. But looking at this year, 6 more race weekends, MotoGP with 3, and Supercars with the 2 double headers on the Gold Coast and in Adelaide. A lot can happen. Follow us on social media at Grid Network TV for the latest update to the grid ranking with graphics. I'm sure we'll have those posted later this evening. And Joe, I believe it's time for our one shining moment.
Yes, one shining moment. Encourage everyone in the chat room. Share what is your one shining moment, favorite moment, standout driver, rider from the race weekend. Kobe, let's start with you. What is your one shining moment?
Well, for my one shining moment, I believe I gotta give a call to Joey Logano for what he was able to do. Think about the wide range of emotions that he's experienced in the last 7 days. Remember, at the Roval, Alex Bowman, excited that he had advanced to the round of 8. Joey Logano really disappointed. Looked like his even year streak was gonna come to an end. And then a few hours later, you find out Bowman's been disqualified, and all of a sudden, you're the final driver to make it into the round of 8. And what Joey Logano go out there and do today, he ended up winning the race and putting it in the championship for at Phoenix, so he has a shot to go for a championship once again. And just really remarkable that in every even year since we've switched to this elimination style playoff format, Joey Logano has been in the championship for every even year. So that remarkable streak will live on for another cycle. And for the big gamble that crew chief Paul Wolf took today, to stretch field until the end. It was quite a remarkable and risky call, but quite the gamble, especially in the Sin City of Las Vegas, Nevada, to do something like that and for it to pay off. But we shouldn't be surprised to see how well Joey Logano does with saving fuel. We didn't think he had enough fuel to make it at Nashville earlier in the year, but what did he do? He ended up saving a whole bunch of fuel, more than we all thought, and ended up winning that race. And what did he do today? He saved the fuel and made it to the finish line and had enough to celebrate, enough left in the tank to celebrate at the end. This is exactly what we call a clutch championship performance and a playoff moment. And that's why whenever Joey Logano's in the playoffs, that's why you have to fear him. And going into Phoenix, the championship four, we still don't know who he's going to be competing with yet for the championship. But I know one thing: Joey Logano and that number 22 team, they're going to be a threat for this NASCAR Cup Series championship once we get to the Valley of the Sun. So Joey Logano and that 22 team, my one shining moment for an excellent performance, taking a risk there by trying to save fuel to the end.
That is definitely a great shining moment. In the chat room, one shining moment. PRN's radio. Doug Rice called his final race today after an outstanding career. Definitely Doug Rice, voice of NASCAR radio. A lot of folks will recognize, calling it a career after this year. My one shining moment comes from Formula One. And that goes to a driver we talked about having his issues with Fernando Alonso, but went out there and scored points. Liam Lawson. While Liam Lawson last year substituting was managed to get points, and then people were talking about should he be there, get the seat. He didn't. I think he had to feel some pressure because if he didn't score points, if he didn't have a great weekend, I think people will be talking about the driver that he replaced, Daniel Ricciardo. He loves Circuits of America. He loves coming to the United States. He loves Texas. He's a fan favorite. Was he really worthy of being dropped before this race? I think Liam Lawson silenced a lot of those doubters. He outperformed his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. Of course, the grid penalties, all that. Well, can't really control that. But then he went out there, delivered a great race, finished ahead, even with Yuki Tsunoda constant that spinning out on his own. Liam Lawson, I think, really showed what he can do with that car. He has to feel pretty good as we are approaching Mexico City. That V carb last year looked pretty good at that track. I think overall, Liam Lawson, he has to feel pretty excited about his start with F1, and hopefully it'll continue on throughout 2024, 2025 as well. And of course, that does it for our show here. Encourage everyone to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs here. Monday, Grid Tonight. Ben and Brandon on another Motor Monday. They're going to be recapping the Xfinity Series race weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Then Wednesday, Grid Tonight. Kobe, Matt, Josh says he's going to be back. Of course, Josh, wishing a speedy recovery. If we see you Wednesday, great. We'll see how all that happens on Grid Tonight. And then, of course, we do this all over again for the next race weekend, where we got more racing. Formula One, NASCAR, they are going to be back racing Mexico City, Homestead, Miami, 2 big races throughout the weekend, next weekend. And we also have supercars. They're going to be back, MotoGP, busy weekend as well. And we're going to preview and recap it all right here on the Grid Network. For Kobe Lameth, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.